Chapter 31. Deja, said Arlene. Boo, I said. Deja Thoris, Rich said, and Arlene snorted. They were speaking some kind of secret code. I wasn't going to worry about it. Starting all over was something to worry about. As before, I inserted my arm up to the elbow in the membranal switch and opened the door. Inside, we found Weems and Yoshida in the same room, same position, still joined head to head, and still holding their pistols in exactly the same position as before, clothed. We stared for a long time, and poor Bill Rich had no idea why Arlene and I were so stunned. He started to examine the bodies, but Arlene gently pulled him back before he could see what they'd done to them. This is worse than the monsters, I said. We passed by and crawled through the narrow tunnel, a very tight fit for Rich. When we reached the end, we faced the same 7 imps as before, only this time we used shotguns. At least that was an improvement. We popped the same door. Out came 2 pumpkins, just like last time. The pumpkins were pretty much the same except for varying sizes. Arlene used the AB-10, and I finished them off with a shotgun, our favorite tactic. Rich made a comment that was new. They'd look better with 2 burning candles for eyes instead of that headlight in the center. No one argued. We started to bypass the collapsing pier, going for the other door instead, but suddenly Arlene said, "Fly, I have a feeling we should duplicate our actions as precisely as we can." Arlene, last time the demons creamed you in that narrow hallway, I reminded her. She nodded, a bit shaky at the thought. She wasn't in any condition to survive a bout like that again. I pursued the point. We've already deviated by not taking Weems's and Yoshida's pistols and by killing the pumpkins outside. I know, she said. I don't have any good argument except for female intuition. I was about to make a crack about the unlikelihood of that particular attribute in Arlene Sanders, but I saw that she was deadly serious. She glared at me until I saw reason. We left Rich in the corridor. He wasn't in shape for what we had in mind. Of course, after we cleared a path for him, he could stroll through in relative safety. We ran like bats out of Dimos down the pier, this time charging through the illusory wall of flame and blowing away the imps we knew to be on the other side. There was another reason I'd insisted we leave Rich behind, one I kept to myself. I half thought we'd find a second Bill Rich hanging from the ceiling. Here, we didn't, and I never brought the subject up to Arlene or Rich. God only knows whether they thought of it themselves, probably, but they kept quiet as well. We slipped back by the secret corridor and used the same trick on the pumpkins and imps inside the room. It was a lot easier when we knew what to expect. This time I knew where the last pumpkin would be floating in ambush. When I opened the door, and I enjoyed not being surprised. Pop goes the pumpkin. Crossing the patio, Arlene grabbed the chainsaw and revved it up, but she made me promise to start shooting the moment she lost it this time. Except that, this time, since she knew what to expect, she didn't slip and wasn't out of position where a demon could knock the chainsaw out of her hand. She ducked. She weaved. She sawed all the demons to death. It was hard to believe she'd been seriously injured only a short time before, but having a chance to get it right the second time did wonders for her psychological recovery. We continued up the narrow corridor to the teleport. So what happens now? I asked. Back to the hand again. I should have kept my hole shut. We stepped aboard, but instead of teleporting, the walls of the chamber lowered into the floor, leaving us standing behind some pillars in a very wide open courtyard. A neat row of UAC boxes stretched across the courtyard before us like a skyscraper on its side. Every box held a 5-pack of rockets, all the rockets in the world. There was also another launcher. A silver lining like this couldn't possibly arrive without an accompanying thundercloud. We heard the thunder of the heaviest feet in all monsterdom. Another lovely steam demon, and there weren't any convenient 0G zones around this time. What the hell is that? Rich whispered, crouching behind a pillar. That, my friend, is a steam demon. 15 feet tall, long horns, a missile launcher for an arm. Oh, one of those, Rich said, nodding. You know about them? Asked an incredulous Arlene. Sure, I've just never seen one before. They ripped off my programming for an ore crusher to run the creature. His tone of voice was what you hear in small Claims court, offended about business as usual. Any way to sabotage it? Rich frowned in thought. A steam demon was large enough to inspire frowns in anyone. If you can get me around back, maybe, he said. That's where the missile feeder is. Worth a try, I said. I looked at Arlene, and she nodded. We dashed out to either side of the pillars as the steam demon spotted us. It was as ugly as last time, but not as terrifying when frozen in indecision about which target to attack. While it made up its mind, assuming it had won, Arlene and I fired rockets from opposite directions. At last the steam demon chose the prettier target and raised its missile launching hand. Arlene saw what was coming and dived behind her pillar. 3 small cruise missiles struck dead on, shattering the pillar. I jumped out and shot the sucker over and over until I got its attention. As the big ugly mother deigned to notice me, I popped behind my own column. Arlene repeated the same process, out from her cover and blasting away. It was kind of like dealing with the playground bully where the stakes were real. The steam demon proved that it had a mind by passing our little intelligence test. It stomped closer to the pillars, cutting off our angle. Arlene was ready for this. She ran backward, zigzagging, popping off an occasional rocket. Time for Rich's plan. While all this was happening, Rich and I were moving into position. When the monster was finally standing with its back to the pillars, lining up a fatal shot for Arlene, I interlaced my fingers, bent down, and let Rich climb aboard. Heavy as he was, I could barely boost him up high enough to grab the back of Godzilla for the ride of his life. He shoved his hand into the missile-loading machinery up to the elbow. I ditched him, as agreed beforehand, and leapt to a safer position to try something else in case Rich failed. Arlene was still dodging around as if she were an actress at a producer's convention. She was too busy now to even take a shot. Besides, she wasn't going to risk hitting Rich. As for the behemoth, it hadn't even noticed that someone was riding on its back. Then Rich ripped out a cable, and the steam demon noticed. It jammed its left arm back at an impossible angle. It could just barely brush Rich, but couldn't bring much force against him, not enough to dislodge him. The hand with the launcher had a better angle. The steam demon got it back, pointed at Rich, and I held my breath, expecting Armageddon. But at the last moment, rarely used self-preservation circuitry kicked in, preventing the big guy from firing into its own missile supply. The steam demon alternately swatted at Rich from both sides until our man finished his task and jumped down. Then Bill Rich started running, headed in my direction. The steam demon turned around with great deliberation and aimed its missile launcher at Rich's head. This was point-blank range. Rich would never have to worry about a hat again. The monster fired. We heard a loud, empty click. Nothing happened. Rich kept running. The steam demon kept clicking, pointing and clicking, as if it couldn't fathom the situational evolution. It flunked that intelligence test. Arlene didn't waste the opportunity. She started pumping at it from behind. The poor bastard turned and aimed its useless arm at her. Click. I shot it 3 times with my own compact rockets. I kept at it, squeezing the ring until my palm became numb, after what must have been 25 direct hits at least. The Titan finally staggered and fell to the deck like a skyscraper under demolition. I kept fiffing, and it got weaker and weaker. Then Arlene got smart, ran around back, and pumped a couple into the missile supply. The steam demon's last words were pretty spectacular. I was surprised. The entire hyperspace tunnel didn't collapse. I was tired, but Arlene and Rich were still full of fire. We went back the way we'd come, but there had been a change in the architecture. Walls no longer stood where they had. Floor plans were different. The room that had been a small, empty antechamber was now a huge room with the equivalent of a beach, against which red waves of toxin washed relentlessly. Look, Arlene said. I followed her pointing finger to the unwelcome sight of a hell prince wading through the crimson toxic surf. After playing patty cake with the steam demon, a minotaur didn't seem that serious, but back on Phobos, Arlene had ripped through a crack to avoid one, and I'd been almost paralyzed with fright. How times change. But it wouldn't do to be careless. We took it left, right with rockets. Until it was slagged. It made one gratifying bork. Before dying, The long, narrow corridor where Arlene had chainsawed the demons was now one edge of a triangular room full of specters. We gave that a pass brushing through before the lumbering, invisible pinkies could avenge their more visible cousins. We beat cleats back to the door leading to the central corridor and slamming it, jamming the latch with some 10mm rounds. We didn't see anything in the corridor outside, so we went back along the secret passage by which we had exited from the room behind the illusory wall. From that room we could see that the lava lake now had a wall at the back, and next to it a corridor that offered the possibility of dry land. I was about to slog across the corridor when Rich got into the act. "Why don't you use the toxic protection suit?" he asked, pointing. "What? Where?" "See those coveralls?" "Huh." I pulled one on over my armor and boots before making a dash through the crud to the island behind it. There, I found the damnedest rifle I'd ever seen. Huge, gyro-stabilized, and with a gigantic battery backpack. Hoisting it up, I was pleased that it was a lot lighter than it looked and considerably less unwieldy. Grinning like I'd won a bowling league trophy, I humped back to where the others were waiting. It was a good thing I followed Rich's advice on the protective suit. The toxic glop ate away at the material with a consistent low hiss for company. I started feeling lousy by the time I was out of the stuff, but at least I wasn't in pain. Arlene reached out to help me climb from the red pool. "Get it off," she said. "Your suit is disintegrating." I eagerly stripped for her. She noticed a telltale bulge under the suit. "What's this?" she asked. I looked at it. It's a big, freaking gun, I guess." "What's it do?" "I hate to say it, but we'd better find out in combat. I don't want to waste power." "Rich." He looked at the thing and shook his head. My skin was tingling after dumping the suit. We three exchanged that special expression that is only shared by those who skirt close to death. We touched hands, more than a handshake, more like taking a secret oath. There was nowhere to go but back out to the courtyard, and now I was glad. We'd already popped the 2 pumpkins. We found another difference in the pattern, a new door next to the old, this one locked. Arlene dropped to her knees and fiddled with it. "Bad news," she said finally. "I can't pick this one." That was annoying. I'd about convinced myself that she could handle any of these. Surveying the scenery, I noticed a third door on the far side of the courtyard. This place was turning into a hotel lobby. "Let's try over there," I suggested. We skulked through the doorway and entered a dark corridor. I took point and no one argued. I suppose I'd become careless. I didn't notice the teleport pad until I'd stepped on it. This one was quick, but it made me feel like I wanted to throw up. Suddenly I was standing on a triangular platform directly behind 2 pumpkins, not 2 meters away.